Hi, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat, I am your host. For today's episode, we're going to talk about self-sabotage and how sometimes you might be self-sabotaging because you grieve the life that you'll be leaving behind if you do the things you need to do or take the action you need to take to get to where you want to be. This is something that I've experienced personally, and I've seen it manifest in many ways throughout my life when I've felt resistance toward doing things or taking action that I knew would lead me down a different path that would then make me have to let go of the life I've been living in the way I've been living it so far. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that you have to let go of everything in your life, that you have to completely change every single aspect of you in order to become, a different version of yourself or to just create something different for yourself in your life. Of course not, right? But there are many ways in which you might be showing up now, you might be existing right now in your life that you would have to let go of in order to step into this new version of yourself. And that can be really difficult. There is a lot of grief to that process, as I've learned from my own experience. There's almost this feeling of betrayal of your past self to do that, to let go of that version of yourself, to let go of those actions, behaviors, beliefs, whatever. It almost feels like you're betraying yourself. And that is actually so painful, and why I think so many of us have a hard time doing the things we need to do, sticking with the plans we have, taking that action, not being scared of being seen, putting our work out there, whatever that is. We know that there's going to be a level of grief to the process of letting go of that past version of ourselves. And that's really tricky to push through. And to use an example from my own life, a couple of years ago, I went through a somewhat significant weight loss. Less significant as I look at it now, but back then it felt very significant in my life because I'd always struggled with my weight, as so many of us do. And I remember for a long time, it was something that I really wanted to do, mostly to change the way I felt about myself and also the way I showed up. However, I struggled so much with actually doing the things I knew I needed to do, the very simple, straightforward things that you need to do with any kind of growth or change or project. I held myself back because I was sad to almost not be that same version of myself continuously. Like I was scared of changing as though I was somehow offending the past version of myself. Because I think there's a part of you that is everything that you're doing right now and has led you to where you are right now has been from a place of self-protection and self-love, right? You've been trying to protect yourself, keep yourself safe, love yourself in the best way you know how. But unfortunately, the way you might know how to love yourself now and show yourself protection might have worked for you in the past. It might have served you in the past, but no longer is serving you right now. So if I use my own example again, the act of maybe overeating or using food for comfort was protecting me in some way when I was younger. It helped me cope with things. It helped me feel good. But as I got older and I continued those habits, they no longer served me because they weren't making me feel good anymore in the way I felt about myself, in the way I showed up, in the way I was able to function physically in many cases. It no longer served me. But because that past version of me was protecting me with those actions, it felt like I was betraying that version of myself. It felt like I was looking down on that person who had tried so hard to keep me safe. And that's really hard. And I think that can lead to a lot of self-sabotage if you don't recognize it within yourself. And I'm sure some of you right now who are listening to this probably recognize it in yourself that, yeah, I actually feel sad for the version of myself that I have to let go of in order for me to move forward right now. I actually feel like I'm going to betray them. And that's keeping you there. It's keeping you stuck in place because you feel obligated to this person or you owe it to them to stay exactly where you are. And now this might also apply to other people in your life too. There might be people in your life who their lifestyle, the way they show up, the things they do, if you were to start doing something different now, you're, in a sense, it might almost feel like you are betraying them. You're talking down to or looking down on them. You're seeing how they show up and judging them as being bad. And to take that action for yourself, to show up in a different way, would almost inadvertently mean something negative towards them. Of course, that's not what it actually means. And if people do feel that way, that is something that they have to sort through, right? It's not your responsibility. But if you are feeling this, it might be internalized and make you self-sabotage after. So it's important to recognize if that is actually happening for you in your life with the things that you're doing right now and what might be leading to that self-sabotage. This also applied for me in my creative work that I held myself back from doing for a really, really long time. The fear of success even creates this grief, right? Because who are you once you finally succeed at the thing you've been trying to succeed at? Who are you now? You're a different version of yourself. You are the version of you that's done the thing, that's succeeded at it. So you no longer relate to the version of yourself that strived and struggled for so long to get to that place. The version of you that you've attached your identity to. You lose that part of yourself. And so there's grief there. And you don't want to experience grief. Grief is painful. It's sad. So that might be holding you back from actually doing the things you need to do, from progressing forward in your life, from showing yourself love, but in a different way, in a way that serves you presently. It doesn't have to mean that you are betraying your past self. It doesn't mean that you're talking down to yourself when you change your affirmations or your beliefs internally. It doesn't mean that the past version of you was doing something wrong. And I think that's the core of it, right? To look at yourself, your past self, as not having done something wrong by being who they were, even though you're trying to change who you are now. That's really, really difficult to do because naturally that's what you assume. That's what anyone would assume, right? If I'm not doing this thing anymore, it must mean because it's bad, it's wrong, it's not good, whatever. But I think the two truths can coexist, right? It was good for you at one point, it served you at one point, but right now it's no longer serving you. It doesn't mean it was good, bad, morally, intrinsically bad or wrong or whatever. It just, right now, it's not what you need. It's not aligned right now. It was at one point, it served you in the way that it needed to. It kept you going in some way to get to this point, but now you are on the precipice of something different and you have to step through that threshold. And it doesn't have to mean anything bad about that past version of yourself. It doesn't have to, not if you don't want it to. But I know this mindset is really difficult to break out of. It's something that I still struggle with to this day, especially if you identify with your struggles, if you identify with that past version of yourself that had to go through those things or had to use whatever tools or techniques or habits to feel okay and feel safe. It's hard to let go of that because it served you. It helped you for so long. It made you who you are right now. So it would feel like a betrayal to all that hard work that was there, the unconscious hard work, to do something different. But at a certain point, you're going to have to decide what's more important, right? Because there's a sacrifice either way. Either you sacrifice the past version of yourself, the past you that was useful at the time, that served you then, but is no longer serving you now, and is maybe even holding you back now. Or you sacrifice the future version of yourself that you've been wanting to be, that you really want to be, that you feel called to. You're going to sacrifice one thing or another. So there's going to be grief either way. You have to decide which one is more important to you, which one's more worth it, and which one is more something that you're more capable of handling. The grief you're more capable of handling. That's really important to ask yourself too, because I know it can be very tricky to push through the discomfort and push through the resistance because of grief, of losing your past self. But you're going to experience grief regardless. You're going to regret not doing the things you needed to do at some point, right? And that's really important, just for your own sake, to keep that in mind, because what is the point then if you're not at least trying the things that you want to do and stepping into the person you want to be in some way, just for your own sake, right? Not to prove it to anybody, not to be perfect at it, not to think that, oh, I'm not doing life right if I'm not, striving to be better all the time. No, that's not at all what I mean. I just mean if you feel called to something, to at least attempt it and not let the fear, the grief, the, potential feeling of betrayal for your past self hold you back, because you're doing yourself a disservice ultimately. And this is just a very insidious form of self-sabotage that I've noticed in myself, and I'm sure other people experience it too. The important thing is to recognize it for what it is. It doesn't mean you have to fix it immediately. It doesn't mean you have to completely transition and change everything in your life right away. Just recognize that you are holding yourself back because of the grief of letting go of your past self, the grief of betraying your past self that served you for so long. Just sit with that. Let yourself accept that that's what's happening. And I think over time, it'll be easier to kind of push through that resistance and step into the stuff you want to do. It's not even that you need to. You want to, you desire, you're called to it. And then allowing yourself to make the sacrifice that you need to make, one way or the other. You're going to have to make a sacrifice regardless. It's going to happen no matter what. So at least having some agency in that decision of which one you're going to make, so that you can at least feel like you are taking the control that you can and doing what you want to do right now in your life, what would feel most aligned for you. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. I hope it gave you a perspective on what you might be struggling with right now when it comes to self-sabotage. If you want to read about these topics, I write over on my Substack. You can also follow me on my social media accounts where I post my other content. And if you want to work with me one-to-one, I offer Zoom calls, I offer email guidance, I offer a few different things that you can choose between so that you can kind of have a chat with me about what you're struggling with specifically. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.